All right, in this video, it is all about factoring x squared plus bx plus c. I've got 3 examples that each have something different about them, which changes how we go about working them out. When we go to factor this, every term is positive. Here, what's different is our bx, our middle term, bx, is gonna be a negative value, but we got a positive c value. And on the third one, I've got a negative c value, positive b value. So each one of these is slightly different. I'm gonna go through each one of them for you. By the end of it, you're gonna be a master at factoring x squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so what is factoring? Factoring is taking this trinomial, this quadratic that we're looking at right here, and we need to split it up into 2 polynomials multiplied together. And when you multiply them together, you get what you see right here. So it's kind of like undoing, foiling, or distributing when you're multiplying 2 binomials together. So early on, students are going to pick up very quickly that that first term in each binomial is very quick and easy to figure out right now because it's just x squared. And we'll always get an x squared when we do x times x, right? X times x is going to give me that x squared. So you can just throw those x's down right away, but if that number changes from 1, right now we just have a hidden 1 right there. If I throw down a different value for the coefficient, if all of a sudden it's 2x squared, that's going to change and make things a little bit more difficult. But in this video, I'm just going over the basics, the easier ones with you right now. I'll make a video in the near future of what do we do when there's a number here other than 1. All right, so for all of these, we can just write our 2 binomials down and then give x for the first terms in each one of them. There we go, set that up. Now you're halfway done, right? You're only trying to figure out both of the binomials, but you've already gotten 2 parts of 1, 2, 3, 4 parts total. We now just need to find 2 numbers, and those 2 numbers need to multiply together to make the c, but they also need to add together to make the 12. So a table of values is helpful. If you could say factors of 27, and then over here in the next column, I tell my students to start by saying the sum of 12. Now, the more and more you do this, you're not going to always have to use these table of values. They just kind of help organizing your thoughts. So factors of 27, 1 times 27, okay? We can go 3 times 9, and that's all we get. Now, I go over here with each of these values, 1 and 27. If I said 1 plus 27, because now we're talking about the sum, I get a 28. Well, 28 does not match up with 12. But if I do 3 times 9, multiply together, I get 27. 3 plus 9 gives me 12, and that's what we were looking for. So we're going to take the 3 and the 9, and they go in just like that, and you're done. You have factored your first trinomial. So now, what changes when the c value is positive, the b value is negative? Positive c, negative b. Well, what does that tell us? I know for a fact that I'm going to have to multiply 2 negative values together, because that's where this comes from, remember, right? X times x makes x squared. So when you multiply first terms, you get the front term. But when you multiply your last terms, you're going to get the c value, the last term of the trinomial. 3 times 9 is 27. Okay, so how am I supposed to come up with 2 numbers that multiply together to make a positive 12? But when I add them together, I get a negative 8. That means both of them are going to have to be negatives. Okay, so when this occurs, positive c value, negative b value, you know both of the terms or both of those numbers you're going to try and find have to be negatives. Okay, so let's do the same thing we did over here. Factors of, we always go with factors of the c, factors of 12. And a sum of, over here we did sum of 12, that's the b value. So here we want to do a sum of negative 8, sum of negative 8. Remember, we know every number has to be a negative times a negative. So I can just start listing out all the different ways I can think of multiplying 2 values together to get 12. 1 and 12, I can go negative 2, negative 6, I can go negative 3, negative 4, and that's all of them. So now I just go and I add these values together. Well, I can get a negative 13 when I add a negative 1 and a negative 12. That's not what I want. I could get a negative 8. Done. Found it. So we're going to take, this term's going to come from a negative 2 and a negative 6. I'm actually going to work this one out for you so you can see it. If you ever want to check to make sure you got your factored form correct, just FOIL it to make sure. X times x is x squared. X times negative 6 is negative 6x. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. And negative 2 times negative 6. Remember, a negative times a negative, that's how we're getting that positive at the end. If you look at negative 6 and negative 2, what are they going to combine and make? Negative 8x. So what would be factored form of this trinomial? You would just be giving these two binomials right here. All right, hopefully this is starting to make sense the more and more that you have FOILed. If you've multiplied binomials for quite a while now, you're probably ready for your factoring because you picked up on all the patterns. All right, last but not least, y squared plus 13y minus 30. I need two numbers that multiply together to make negative 30. So I need factors of negative 30. Well, the only way to multiply two numbers together and get a negative is if one of them is a negative and one of them is a positive. So what I know right now is this. I want to go, when I make my table of values, I want to say a negative times a positive. Okay? 30. Numbers that make 30. Well, let's go with negative 1 times positive 30. But we're going to hope that those add together and give me a sum of 13. Now, if you are doing one of these where the C is negative, you're going to want to give both combinations of those values. I've got a negative 1 times a 30, but you can also say a positive 1 times a negative 30 could do it as well. Because these are going to produce different sums. One of them will be positive, one of them will be negative. It looks like we're looking for the positive 13. Okay, so what are we looking for a sum of? Positive 13. Negative 1 plus a 30, that's only going to give me a 29. Positive 1 plus a negative 30, that's going to be a negative 29. But that's not what I'm looking for. I'm hoping to get 13. So I keep going. All right, another way to get 30. 10 and 3. Ooh, I like that one. 10 times negative 3. And then now let's say negative 10 times positive 3. That's what most kids are going to think the answer is on this one. But then when they go over here to get the sum, what's a 10 plus a negative 3? Yeah, 7. That's not what we want. What's a negative 10 plus a 3? Negative 7. Still not what we want. The one that we're missing right now is that 15 times 2. 15 times 2 gives me 30. So if I can say a positive 15 times a negative 2, will that make negative 30? Yes, it will. But what will it add together to make? And it's going to be positive 13. We found the two numbers we want. We're going to say plus 15 there, minus 2 there, and there's our final factored form of the third quadratic. Okay, you're taking these trinomials, splitting them up into two binomials that when multiplied together, bring you right back to where you were. That is factoring. One of the best ways to organize your work is through these table of values. You can start by doing these, but eventually you're going to get to the point where you don't need to organize it in any way. You can just start thinking about which numbers are going to give you what you want. Factoring is an extremely important skill. You want to get really good at it. The more you know your times tables, the easier it's going to be. If you know your multiplication and you have some strong number sense, you're going to have a lot of fun with these. If you do not know your times tables, this is going to be a struggle. So that's why I've always been talking to my kids all year long that still struggle with some of their multiplication. The stuff I'm teaching you now, it's difficult if you don't know how to multiply. All right, study hard and good luck on your upcoming test.